don't be afraid to fail, I think would be the one thing that I would really say. When I was leaving school, I did not get the grades I needed to get for going to do my apprenticeship. And I was very lucky that the company that I was going to do my apprenticeship with allowed me to go to night school and redo some hires whilst also starting on my first year of my apprenticeship. I think the thing for me is there's not always one path. So it's just being open to taking opportunities where you can. And if you really have that interest, follow it, look at how you can develop it, however that may be.
My guest this week is Mhairi Brown, who is an aerospace engineer. Mhairi has a degree in automotive engineering from Bell College of Technology, which is now part of the University of the West of Scotland. Mhairi worked in the automotive industry on refuse and recycling vehicles before moving into the aerospace industry with Rolls-Royce, and currently she is the Director of Operations for Skylands Aviation Limited. Mhairi, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Hi Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you very much for joining us today.
No problem.
Can I just start off with you explaining what is automotive engineering?
So automotive engineering is essentially a basis of mechanical engineering, but then thinking about automotive applications. So looking at car design, looking at from a Formula One point of view and thinking about the aerodynamics, lots of thermodynamics that's involved in it. So essentially there's lots of different areas to think about when it comes to automotive engineering, but predominantly it's looking at anything really to do with cars, vehicles, etc.
And what is aerospace engineering, since that's what you currently do, and how does it differ from automotive engineering?
Okay, so from an aerospace point of view, this time we're looking at aeroplanes, predominantly helicopters as well. And with automotive engineering, if you think of the aerodynamics involved in them, you're trying to keep things on the ground. With cars from Formula One, you're looking at, right, how low can we keep this to the ground? Whereas the opposite applies from an aerospace point of view. You're obviously trying to keep things in the air. So the reverse is obviously the case with that.
And obviously the title aerospace and aerospace engineer has space in it. So is part of your job also involved in looking at travelling into space and rockets and things like that? Or is it more on the planes and helicopters?
Yep, so from my point of view, no, it's absolutely just planes and helicopters. I have an absolute personal interest in space, and certainly from a Scottish development point of view, just now there's a lot of investment and a lot of development in the space industry. There's just a new rocket company opened up in Cumbernauld very recently. So although directly my job's not involved in it, I've got a personal interest in it really.
And is that an area then that you could see yourself moving into as you carry on in your career, going into that sort of space side of things?
I'm a big believer in never say never. Like, as you said, I started off in automotive and I've now moved into aerospace. I think the great thing for me about engineering is it's getting that engineering foundation, whatever your specific engineering route is in it. So if you take the aerospace and the automotive, there's a mechanical bias in all of that. How does something work? Back to the basics of engineering, which got me interested in it in the first place. I just like to understand how things work. So short term, I don't see any development into space, but never say never.
And a couple of points that I want to pick up on there, so I'm going to go one at a time. First, you said about the transferability with the engineering skills. So what made you decide to move from automotive engineering into the aerospace side of things?
I think with all of my career, it's opportunity. There was no conscious decision to go, I'm going to move from one industry to another. As I'm saying, the great thing about engineering is those transferable skills. So I saw a job advertised for Rolls-Royce that I really liked the sound of. And by that point in time in my development path, I had moved from the kind of a core engineering into operations management, and saw that opportunity and went for it and got the job. So it was more of an opportunity for me than anything else.
And the other thing that I wanted to pick up on was you started talking about what got your interest in engineering. So can we go back to that part in your past? What first got you interested in STEM?
I think as a kid, my dad, probably. He was a very hands-on person and very into cars. So he had an old Jaguar that he restored. So Saturdays and Sundays were spent with me traipsing about classic car shows with him, looking to pick up radiator grills and wing mirrors and boot lids and different things like this. And I was always one of these kids that I was quite practical. If my dad was doing something, I'd be over at the back of him looking to get a shot with a screwdriver or the drill or whatever that would be. And I think it was just that natural progression from there. I always then wanted to do engineering through school. That was my thought process I just like that practical side of things. And I kind of geared my path to do engineering type subjects, so maths, physics, graphical communication, that type of thing, which just happened to be the things that I actually really enjoyed doing. I then, when I was leaving school, I'd applied to go to university, and that was my plan. I was going to go to university, but then started thinking the whole thing that got me interested in engineering in the first place was the practical and the physical side of it. And that's why I then ended up going down an apprenticeship route rather than going straight to doing my degree. So I managed to get a job with a company called Cummins Engine Company, who manufactured large diesel engines. So for like tractors, for tanks, for ships. And I went then and went through my apprenticeship with them, which was a great thing for me to do, because as well as having that practical aspect of it, I was working. I was also studying part-time to do my HNC. And I could really see a career path opening up for me. And the great thing I found about an apprenticeship was you were working within different areas of the business to almost try and see, what do you actually really like doing? So although it was engineering, as we already said, there's so many different types of engineering. So that allowed me to explore those different possibilities. But then almost at the end, so in my last year of doing my apprenticeship, Cummins Engines actually closed. So they were a large multinational company, and they were based in Shorts, was the facility that I was in. So they actually closed down when I was going into my last year of my apprenticeship. And at that point, they then sponsored me to go and do my degree. And that was why I then, from that point, went into automotive engineering, because at the time, I really liked F1. So that was the kind of catalyst for me of, I've got an interest in this. I think that's the road I'll go down.
And you don't hear a lot of people talking about apprenticeships so much these days. There seems to be a lot of a lean towards going to university. If you could go back and do it again, would you still go for that apprenticeship route first, do you think?
100% I would. 100%. I think, like, there's nothing wrong with leaving school and going straight and doing your degree. I think it's a very personal thing. From me back then, so I mean, this was 1994, so it was a long time ago. From me back then, I think going straight to university, I possibly would have struggled. Whereas going and actually doing the practical side of things with an apprenticeship, I was engaged, I was enjoying it. It didn't seem like hard work.
And when you were doing the apprenticeship, you said you got a taste of lots of different types of engineering within that. Is that part of also your experience there? What led you to the automotive as well as the F1? Did you get any of that experience at Cummins?
So from a Cummins point of view, there was lots of different areas in engineering. So you had the design aspect of it, you had support engineering where you were supporting production, from a quality engineering point of view as well, where you're looking at, are they actually doing things correctly? Are they following processes? How do we improve those processes? And I suppose nowadays as well, things like lean thinking, you were applying them at that time without really realising that that's what they were. So it's interesting as well how my career path has developed from just being specifically involved in engineering to then getting into things like lean manufacturing, production management, etc.
And just something I want to pick up on there, because I'm not entirely sure what it is. You'd mentioned there lean thinking and lean manufacturing. What
Yeah.
is lean thinking and lean manufacturing?
Okay, so essentially lean was a concept developed by Toyota back into that automotive industry, by Toyota by Toyota in the automotive industry in the 70s, I think it was. And it was formed part of the TPS, they called it, Toyota Production System. And essentially what they were trying to do is look at how do we lay out things that can eliminate waste. So when you're into that, Toyota were obviously manufacturing in quite high volumes. So it was repeatability of the same parts. So therefore, how do you set up your processes? How do you lay out your facility so that you minimise waste? And then looking at all the different types of waste as well that are involved in those processes.
And now we've got a good overview of, what your qualifications were and what you've done with your apprenticeship and going through school and getting interested in STEM. So now, as the Director of Operations for Scans Aviation, what does your role involve?
So we are a very small consultancy company, and essentially what we do is we have some clients within the aerospace industry who will look to support from an operational point of view, from a lean point of view, and just almost plug in the gaps. I think companies now are recognising that as they go forward and do things, they maybe have small projects that they're working on that they don't necessarily have that internal resource to actually work on those projects. So companies like ours can then come in and work on those projects. One of the projects that I'm working on just now with a client of ours is a move to a new facility. So the company are a long-standing company who their facility that they're currently in just now was just born out of their business developed. So they just kept adding equipment and adding equipment. So if you think back to that lean thing just now, there's nothing really lean about it because the layout has been born out of necessity and development. So for us now, it's a brilliant opportunity. We've got a lovely new facility and it's like a clean sheet of paper. You're starting from scratch, thinking about how do we actually move this facility and remove waste from everything, make sure that we've got all the right equipment in place. If you think about a facility that's been running for a long period of time, their equipment's old. So again, one of the great things about engineering for me just now as it starts to develop is you're then thinking about environmentally. If we're putting new equipment in, what does that need to look like? What are the implications? Obviously thinking about from a Scotland point of view, we talk about net zero, so getting that carbon footprint down. So it's looking at how we do that as well through making sure that we put efficient machinery in that is not going to be detrimental to the environment.
Yeah, and it sounds there a lot like you've moved from a lot of the more hands-on things to now more the management and operations. Do you miss being hands-on?
I would say I miss it because there'll be a certain level of that. I'm just the type of person that's always going to be hands-on. So when we're moving facility, I'll still be there with a brush and shovel or lifting boxes or whatever we're doing. But I just feel that the great thing with engineering is although I have moved on and I'm now very much, I'm sitting in front of a computer most of the time now rather than actually being hands-on engineering, it's just a developmental path for me.
And all careers and journeys do develop anyway, as just as
For
people
sure.
develop. So it's nice that you're just taking that in your stride and not missing, because development's something there for all of us.
And I think you're always learning from that point of view as well. Like even just now, I'm learning from moving this facility from an environmental point of view, something that in previous roles I've not really had to consider too much. Whereas it's expanding my knowledge and what's available out there, what considerations do we need to have, what impact is this going to have for my kids, for kids in the future. So it's interesting.
So this is a good time to move on to that next question. Obviously there you spoke about lifelong learning, which is very important for all of us, but also about looking to the future for your children and other children. So have you got any advice for any children or young people out there that are perhaps interested in STEM but aren't sure what they can do with that or how to pursue it into a career?
Yep. I mean, I think talk to your teachers, talk to your head teacher. I know there's an initiative out there called the primary engineer, and I don't know if that's something that you're aware of, but essentially the primary engineer look to support schools in developing those STEM areas. So I think for me, that's a brilliant initiative that there was never anything like that when I was at school. So it's seeing things like that and actually going for them. If you have that interest, don't just sit in it, actually progress it, move on with it. Things like my kids, I've got 2 boys and they love Lego. And that's something that, for me, that's right back to the basics of, that's almost a basic foundation in engineering. You're taking something, you're following instruction, you're building it, you've got that process. So it's just do as many things like that as you can. Don't be afraid to fail, I think would be the one thing that I would really say. When I was leaving school, I did not get the grades I needed to get for going to do my apprenticeship. And I was very lucky that the company that I was going to do my apprenticeship with allowed me to go to night school and redo some hires whilst also starting on my first year of my apprenticeship. I think the thing for me is there's not always one path. So it's just being open to taking opportunities where you can. And if you really have that interest, follow it, look at how you can develop it, however that may be.
So that was lots of great advice there for pursuing STEM. And also right now, there's the initiative to try and encourage more people from ethnic minority backgrounds, and particularly as well, more girls into STEM fields, especially in the technology and engineering side, because on the biological side, females are actually in there more than men. Have you seen any change in the engineering industry with more females coming through in the time that you've been in the industry?
So the answer to that question is yes. I think there are definitely more women and girls in engineering now than there was when I was first starting out. When I first started out, when I got my apprenticeship, I was the first female technical apprentice that Cummins had. And then when I started working Rolls-Royce, I was their first female operations manager as well. So kind of quite a few firsts from my point of view, but I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet, I suppose, about women in engineering from the point of view of, I don't look at myself as a woman in engineering, I'm just an engineer. So I recognise the fact that we need to talk about it. And through different jobs that I've had as well in different roles, I very much was kind of the champion for attending women in engineering events, etc. But the challenge for me is, how do we stop talking about girls and women in engineering? We're just engineers, whilst also getting that balance of actually trying to encourage people in. So I think it's a difficult one. There are definitely more women in engineering positions, in those top level engineering positions as well, which is fantastic. And it's never been something that I feel's held me back in engineering. Even working with guys in the shop floor who've been doing the same job for years and years and years, and you're trying to show them a better way to do something or a different way to do something, it's very much about how you approach it rather than what your gender is. So it's how we try and take that gender out of it, whilst also recognising that we're trying to encourage girls to get into engineering.
And seeing more women out there in engineering as well will make it more normalised. So girls and young women, they'll have these people to look up to that have already sort of paved the way, as it were, and then as more come in, I suppose it will normalise more, and then it, as you were saying, you just get judged on your merits, as should be the case with any sort of career.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think of like medicine, for example, I suppose you probably a good split of male and female from a doctor's point of view, whereas if you look at nurses, it's predominantly female. So you then kind of wonder, how's that developed over time as well, I suppose, really.
So this is a good point to bring in our final question, because we've covered quite a lot here. My last question for you is going to be, what is your favourite thing about being an engineer?
working out how to do things, I would say. I think the great thing for me about engineering is it's not black and white. There's not always just one answer to your problem. It's coming up with different solutions and looking at which one's the best one. So it really gets your brain thinking and engages that out of the box thinking as well. That doesn't say, okay, this is the only way I can do things. How can I do something a different way? So almost like thinking back to that Lego, one of the things that my boys are very specific, that they get their Lego out, they open the box and they open the first bag and they follow the instructions, which is brilliant from a process point of view. But once they've built it, they've built it. Whereas I'm very much, they've got this big old Lego head that probably most kids have with all their different bits of Lego, and it doesn't do anything. What could you actually make out of that Lego that doesn't do anything? So it's trying to think about that from the point of view of there's more than one way to do something.